back at your last 20 years in the industry, how do you view the progress that we've made in the energy transition so far? And what critical lessons do you feel like we've learned from the fossil fuel era?
So looking back at my career of about 20 years in renewables, I think we can say that these advancements we made in renewable technology and in the energy transition was unthinkable of back in the days when we started. So it was the business of tree huggers who kind of believed, although I must say I wasn't believing it too much in it at the beginning. So when I came into the industry, I came out of the construction industry, and I just found that very interesting as an engineer, what problems, in my case, the wind energy had to tackle with these dynamic loads. But I wasn't quite sure where that was going. But if we then see what happened over these 20 years, I think it's quite remarkable how at the beginning we were very focused on a single wind turbine, somehow to make it work, to make it last. And then we shifted towards looking at wind farms and how they could perform maybe as a farm. And now we are looking portfolios. And the next big thing coming now is that we're looking into hybrid portfolios. So I came from wind, and then I moved also into solar and battery storage. And now we are even going further, maybe into hydrogen production, green hydrogen production, and use cases for this. So that is quite remarkable. Having that, if we look at what we would need to do to avoid a rise of temperatures, which is dangerous for our planet, then we are not moving fast enough. So I think that's something we also have to acknowledge. I think the important part, and we may go deeper there in some parts later, is that we remain fair in judging how well we did so far. We have to look into the different starting points in different countries. We have to, of course, also ensure that it is a just transition. That is a topic which we have talked about a couple of years back quite intensively. I think we forgot a little bit about this again, and now we are, I think, kind of try to rethink how do we make the transition happen, and that concerns me a little bit. So, big picture, we were banking a lot on installing as much renewable capacity as possible. We then acknowledged a couple of years back that this is not enough. We need other technologies like carbon capture and storage, like green hydrogen. We are actually far behind on those, unfortunately, as well. And now we see a little shift, it seems, away from installed capacity in renewables towards maybe alternative solutions like carbon capture and storage. My belief is we need to do all of it to achieve. What can we learn about these last decades in the oil and gas industry? I think the oil and gas industry was essential for the development of our societies. You can, of course, be very critical about the emissions, but we wouldn't have made all these advancements without the oil and gas industry. I think now it's kind of important as a society, as industries, maybe to put it under this headline, to pay back. I mean, we have utilized these resources. We have made these great advancements. Now we see on the horizon that we get in quite some trouble if we continue as we did. So now it's time to do something about this. And I think this is kind of a big responsibility of the private person like you and me, the industry, but especially also of governments, to make sure people are moving kind of in a regulated way, and it's not unfair to those who try to be first movers, so to those who take risks. So I think this is a big struggle at the moment if we look about how to go forward, how to kind of see that way ahead to actually get us there. And that's probably resulting in the fact that we won't, because as we saw in the past, as we always saw in the industry, and there's a nice kind of connection back then also to renewables, whatever we do is kind of driven by making profits. I mean, it needs to be a business. most of the people, even if they are believing in climate change, as most of us do, they need a business case. And I think that
Yeah.
is quite interesting also what we see or what we saw in renewables, coming back to this picture of the tree huggers I mentioned earlier. The big breakthrough of renewables really came when in some parts of the globe, renewables generation had a levelized cost of energy which was competitive, which could kind of maybe even be cheaper than generating electricity from coal or other energy carriers. And so then it became big, right? Then the pension funds, the banks, the equity investors moved in. And that's, I think, something we just have to accept as the unfortunate truth. There is, like, also for the big oil and gas majors, where I may be biased and say, I would love to see you do more than you do now, because you have benefited from the business you had so far. Now it's time to stand up, but they have shareholders as well.
Yeah.
They need to stay in business as well. So it's quite complex to navigate through this. So I think what we have learned is we can bank on, we are really good in coming up with great new technologies. We have seen that in the oil and gas industry from the very beginning when it started to where it has developed now. We have seen in nearly all technologies we developed that at some points prices like decreased, things became more affordable, and once a broader part of the society somehow decided it's a good idea we go this way, we have managed to see or to ensure quite good developments in growth in these sectors.
Yeah, yeah. It's really interesting what you say about there's definitely been times over the last 20 years where there's been periods of a lot of noise being made about the energy transition and what can we do to meet our goals that we set at the COP21 to get to net zero by 2050. And there's been times where it just doesn't seem to be a topic of agenda on any of the news articles or when you're hearing politicians speak. So it sounds like you bring a sense of optimism that we could still meet this target by the middle of the century, but doing so is going to require something of a refocus and massive investment and efforts in renewable energy. So given the scale of that challenge, we're going to need a lot of people to make that happen. How do you think competition in the labour market is going to shape our journey to net zero? And what do you think we can do to address the skills gap to meet these demands?
Yes, I'd like to go there. And before we go there, I make one step back. So I am positive about us kind of advancing on the energy transition. I think we kind of have to accept the fact that we can't limit to 1.5 degrees anymore. So we are kind of post that. We have just published our energy transition outlook. DNV is doing this every year. It was published this year in 2024 now again, and we come somehow to the conclusion there that we may end up at 2.2. This is interesting in the context that if we all would be so keen to reach 1.5, we could still do it. We would have the technology, we would probably have the money. But as it is so complex, as we also alluded to before, that there's different industries, there's different countries, there's consumer behavior and all of that, it's unrealistic to assume that we actually can make it. But then, of course, we should never give up in advance on this. And then we come to who is doing this. And then we come to the labor market. I think there's a couple of interesting aspects also under this headline that it needs to be a just transition. So for me, there are actually three important aspects to this. First of all, myself coming from the renewables industry, definitely we have a scarcity of talent at the moment. It's incredibly difficult to find the right number of experienced engineers, in my case mostly, in the different segments. So in my case, wind, solar, and battery storage. They exist, but it's not enough. At least in Germany, I can say the universities haven't educated enough engineers with that skill set. In new markets where we are also active, We see sometimes nearly none. So people have to move in from outside. And if you want to build up your own teams there, it's like incredibly hard to find people. And that hopefully changes with more young people moving into education, which then obviously also needs to be offered to them, where they get a really good foundation in helping the energy transition. I think one issue with this is that we unfortunately have seen a couple of examples in the last couple of years and also very recently, which has made employers from the renewable industry a little bit unreliable, because for some companies we have seen also quite substantial layoffs. So for example, for equipment providers, so some wind turbine manufacturers have struggled quite badly in the last couple of years. Some of the developers are in quite some trouble at the moment as well, because of the rising cost of kind of loans, supply chain issues, and so on and so forth. These things happened, and that has led to some sort of uncertainty. So I guess while this would be good for the transition in itself, that we remove these uncertainties, this would also be really good for the labor market in itself, so that we get more young talent again to trust in it. Because I think long term, there's absolutely no question that this is a great area to be in, because that will not go away. Same as digitalization, and maybe even better, you combine your talent in this, right? You know something about the new generation technologies or anything what is required for the energy transition. It could also be carbon capture and storage or anything with hydrogen. Combine this with digital, that would be an awesome combination. So with young people, we see that relatively seldomly. We do have, of course, quite a few people, at least in the core technologies, in the market, but it's simply not enough. But then we do have a chance here, and I think the reskilling and upskilling potential is quite massive. So it has slowed down a little bit. I think the oil and gas industry will maintain maybe longer than we 10 years back maybe thought. But still, I think overall, we will see that slowly some jobs in the oil and gas industry will go away, whereas then other jobs will come. So, for example, in CCS, and there would be actually a quite big potential to address this, so that we do not just lose talent. I think in Corona, or in this COVID times, we saw that in a quite bad way, that some industries were hit kind of badly, then they just let their people go. And when things then picked up again, they struggle to find talent, right? So now we could do it in a more planned way, that we say, okay, at some point we see in the energy industry, in one part of the energy industry, there may be less jobs available, but on the other hand, in another part of the energy industry, there will be much more demand. As in fact, in renewables, we do have much more demand already than we can cover now. So that we address then this with this reskilling and upskilling, provided, of course, that the candidates are willing to do so.
Yeah, you mentioned last time that when you're talking about competition in the labour market, it's everyone is fishing from the same pond, and the pond is something too small for the requirements needed in the development of renewable energy. You also mentioned digitalization, AI, and how that enables you to do more with less. And it's not about getting rid of people, but enhancing the people that you have there. What role do you think that's playing in the labor shortage that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question, because there are so many different angles to answer there. So first of all, of course, the technology, if we talk about digitalization, if we talk about artificial intelligence, that first of all can do quite a lot in the energy industry itself to use our assets more efficiently.
Mm.
So let's talk about when do we consume energy, and if we do that in a more intelligent way, then maybe we need less of transmission and distribution capacity, and so on and so forth. So demand response technologies, that a lot will be happening there, and then we need probably a lot less people who push buttons and make the systems do whatever they have to do to balance our energy system. That will happen. On the other hand, if we talk about people trying to achieve things in offices that need to be done, for example, also consultants, I think it gives us a big opportunity to take the boring parts or the parts where people are prone to make many mistakes if
Yeah.
they do it for too long away from people. So be it data cleaning, be it maybe extracting an executive summary from a really good report or something, things which may take quite some time, but do not really add value because you have done all the hard work already. Now it's just about getting kind of the key sentences out there and all these kind of things. We see this more and more happening. We try this ourselves, of course, as much as we can, so that we use the talent we have really for the difficult things.
Yeah.
Because what AI still can't do is to answer really complex tasks. So I try that sometimes with cybersecurity related matters to, for example, identify threat angles on certain systems. You can be sure the system never gets it fully right, but the cybersecurity expert you then ask, he can see the bigger picture and have the maybe also motivation of the actors and all that in mind, and they come to conclusions much faster. So AI is far from doing such complex tasks, but the easier ones we can use. And then I think the third component is
Mm.
about getting into a topic really fast, which can be quite important for new joiners in an industry, or maybe also for new joiners in a company. I find for this, it's fantastic. So if you, for example, are tasked, I don't know, to prepare, or you have started somewhere in a company, they do a lot of technical due diligence,
Yeah.
and you want to know what is this all about, right? So then AI is fantastic in you asking questions. First of all, what is this? Who needs this? What are the different angles to this? And the nice thing then is that you get so many new ideas what you can think about, because this thing will just list all the different aspects it can maybe find, and it gives you then the opportunity to go deeper, and you may not have had come up yourself with these ideas. So for this, I think it will speed up us grasping some knowledge in new areas. Of course, then later, still we may need to take the book or ask the expert to go really deep, but we can be quite broad. And in our company, and I guess that's a general thing to say, we often speak about these T-shaped employees. And with
Yeah.
what we mean with this is that the vertical part is where you go really deep, where you are an expert. You probably have somehow studied that, or you have done it for a really long time. And that's good. But the real value you bring to a company, if your horizontal part is really strong as well, if you have a really good overview, if you can kind of understand where your expertise is contributing to, or what your expertise is contributing to, what else it could be relevant for. And I think that has become really much better now with this easy access to knowledge through AI.
Yeah. Yeah, that is really, really interesting. You can almost let it do your Google deep diving and heavy reading for you, the boring parts, like you say, because it will give you a nice pictured summary of what's out there, and then you can choose which bit you dive deeper into. Um, I'm going to go back to, you were talking about how DNV have developed an energy transition outlook, which has now been slightly modified. It's giving us a pretty clear answer that we're not going to make it to net zero. Where does all of this data come from? And do you feel like we really are too late to correct our course?
Yeah, so we do the energy transition outlook in DNV for a couple of years now, and that was also the intention, that we can always compare how things have changed over time. It's not just a scenario; it's
Mm.
really us, having a kind of a forecast based on the assumptions we made. To make these assumptions, we kind of cut the globe into certain regions. So it's like North America, Latin America, Europe, Sub-Saharan Africa, Middle East, of course, India, Greater China, and so on and so forth, which then come with their own features with regards to where they are, with the energy infrastructure, where are they with their economic strength, what have we heard about targets they have in the future. But there is also a lot of kind of economic drivers behind this. So, as we also alluded to earlier in this podcast, we have said that while many people agree to the transition as a must, we have always seen the big developments when things became business cases. So we factor that in as well. It's not just a kind of wishful thinking. We try to make this likely scenarios. Also, how, for example, energy carriers are transitioning, how fast can it really go that, for example, a country like India can move away from coal and really get into renewables, right? Where we see, okay, they still need some coal maybe today, but they have installed already quite a lot of renewables. Whereas in other countries, like here in Europe, it may already be much faster that we can, or did already move away from these fossil carriers towards renewables and have very, very ambitious plans to get to net zero soon. So we put all of this into consideration, and we use also interviews with leaders in the industry, what they think about the developments, to kind of substantiate the assumptions we make. We take policies in the different countries we know of into consideration, and there's a quite substantial research team behind this. And then we do have an engine, like a simulation engine, and can come up with where we think we land, and we can kind of see the different developments for per industry segment. So, for example, what is happening with the use of electricity in transport or in heat? How is it taking up? In the last report, we did a modification on what do we expect about the uptake of offshore wind, where we had forecasted slightly better results and have taken them down now a little bit, I think by 18%. We have taken down how hydrogen is an important energy carrier in 2050 by like 1% from 5 to 4. So it is these fine kind of adjustments we can make in the model based on how we, since we started, can adjust these factors we are looking at and make them more realistic, so to say, by considering what we have seen happening over the past years and what we expect to happen then in the future. We are not saying this is the truth, because so many things can happen, right? So when we had COVID, for example, we saw obviously a little kind of dint in a good one in the reduction of emissions, which we hadn't foreseen. The Ukraine war has some impact and all these kind of things. So these things we can't foresee. But overall, we see it seems to be relatively stable. So at the moment, we had 2.2 degrees. We had times where we were at 2.3. We maybe had times where we were a bit more optimistic. But yeah, it's about there. And most important is we don't use it to tell the world we know best how this will all go. We use it to get to interesting dialogues. And one new dialogue which has come up this year is, for example, the importance of biodiversity of whatever we do. We haven't talked about this either yet, but so I think that was always also a discussion around renewables, especially in countries where renewables was new. I remember in Germany when renewables, I'm talking of wind energy now, was new. We had so many discussions in onshore wind about birds that are getting killed from the rotors. And then later we had so many discussions about how maybe offshore structures are a problem for fish and mammals. When countries are a bit more mature in these industries, they find out that, yes, of course, there is an impact. Nobody is denying this. but most of the times they may not be that big. But we see now, because renewables is getting deployed in larger scale now and in more countries, this comes back as a topic, and we have to take that serious. And that will also slow down a couple of developments again. So if we look at Norway, for example, last year, this year, biodiversity very high on the agenda suddenly. You could say, at least from my perspective, that has slowed down their ambitions in renewables, because now also from a political perspective, it's a bit different how you talk about this. And this is also important because we can only succeed in renewables if we get the acceptance of the people, us, who have to live with it, right? So, yeah, so that was a long answer to a short question. And maybe you give me a cue on the second one, or where that was leading to again.
Well, it's a nice place to round up, and hopefully with something of a message of optimism. But we were talking about, do you feel that we're too late to correct our course?
Yeah, so a couple of years back, DNV did the Pathway to Net Zero report, and a huge component of this was that we need to do more of the things that are required faster. And I think the brutal truth so far is that we have done less of the things and a little bit slower. So unless some miracle happens, I think the 1.5 degrees, that is gone. In fact, we may be there already or slightly beyond it. But I think, we can't give up now, of course, and we shouldn't get too frustrated about this. I guess I'm disappointed about this because it's not that we didn't see that coming, but we as a society have failed, so to say, to remain on this path. Now it's about to still do the very best, that we limit everything beyond 1.5 as much as we can, and maybe don't make it 2.2 or 2.1 or 2.0. And we have to also then maybe think into directions, what do we do to save people from the impact? And I think that word is then coming into play again, that we need to talk about a just transition, because I'm talking to you from Germany. Yes, we will have some more rains, we will have some more storms, we have some flooding, but it's all very limited to what other regions may experience, and we have to think about what we do about that, so that we take everybody with us in a fair way, to succeed on the energy transition as good as we can.
Okay, super. Thank you, Mathias.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. That was an interesting discussion. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you so much.